Okay. All right, here we go. So, um, for everybody in the group that's here, well, thanks for coming along. And we're going to give a super big thanks to Mark Darrah for joining us to just answer the questions that we pulled the group, see what they were interested in asking. I'm going to give Mark, actually, for 2 seconds, I'm going to give you a little bit of background on the group. We're technically the largest Dragon Age community on Facebook. There's about 30, I think we just crossed 31,000 between
Wow.
this one and the we also, the team of people that I run stuff with, we also have a Mass Effect group with about 86,000 people, is somewhere around there. And I don't know, ever since the BioWare forum shut down, I think this and Reddit are where most people go, but on Facebook we're certainly the largest group. So we put up a poll, asked people what they would be interested in asking you, and we sent you the questions, and we'll go over them now. And
Yeah.
for everybody watching, excuse me, maybe you could give a 10,000-foot view on yourself, what you did with BioWare and what you worked on, Dragon Age, all that stuff.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm Mark Darrah. I was the executive producer for Dragon Age. I left BioWare in February of 2021. And then Dragon Age has had a few different leaders since then. But I worked at BioWare from 1997 till 2021. So I worked on the Baldur's Gate series, a little bit on Neverwinter, Jade Empire, a little bit on the very first Mass Effect, though you can't ask me too many questions on that because my role was pretty weird. And then I was moved into production on Sonic Chronicles, and then led Dragon Age from Dragon Age Origins through Inquisition. Had the, let's say, privilege of being the person at the sticks when Anthem launched, and then came back on Dragon Age at the end there. And now I am a YouTuber, I guess. And I have a YouTube channel, Old Game Dev Advice, where I sort of go through some of my experiences and share different views on different things. Some of it useful for people who are in game development, some of it useful for everybody. So if you're curious about that, if you like the sound of my voice, maybe check it out.
I actually think everybody in the group would like it. So I'm going to put the link to the channel in the post after it goes up, and so that everybody can go in and give you a sub and make sure and put some engagement on the YouTube channel. I do actually want to say thank you very much for joining us today. This is super great. I really appreciate it. And also a big thank you just in general for the work at BioWare. I feel like there's a difference between BioWare communities like Dragon Age and Mass Effect. They're kind of different than other communities. They just are. There's a different sense of camaraderie and the engagement with a lot of the people and sort of all of that. And the games that BioWare did, a lot of which you had part in, just brought a lot of life and love and, you know, just experience out of people that you don't get in a lot of other places, a lot of other games. And in general, they help generate these communities of people that are just really awesome. We have fantastic artists and great cosplayers and just all of the above, amazing people that are here. So
Yeah.
we all just want to say thank you, actually.
I totally agree with that about the BioWare communities. I really saw it in 2017 as my Twitter account became a weird mixture of Dragon Age people and future Anthem people, and you could definitely see the two cultures trying unsuccessfully to kind of mix together there. Because I now have probably about 35,000 Dragon Age interested people following me on Twitter, and about 35,000 people who I picked up who are Destiny players and Anthem players. So and some of them are the same people, and some of them are very different people.
Interesting. We started an Anthem group, and it just didn't generate the same interest. I don't know. It didn't take off in the same way, the same sense of like talking about all the things that people love to talk about, especially like, you know, just the stories and characters of romance and all that. It didn't.
I mean, he doesn't have romances. I think also Anthem definitely tried too hard to make sure people understood that its story was weaker than the other BioWare titles. I actually think if people like a Dragon Age story and they just really want a BioWare story, If you go in with that eye, it's not a bad story. It's not a, it's, I actually think a lot of people that are Bioware core people might enjoy just playing through it as if it was a single player game. It's, it's certainly not Bioware's strongest story, but if you have nothing else, I don't know how cheaply you can buy it now, probably pretty cheaply.
Well, if you got Game Pass, it's free.
That's true. So just turn off playing with other people and play through the crit path, and it's it feels like a Bioware story.
I super enjoyed Anthem, actually. The gameplay. I mean, the same criticisms, I guess, are probably just universal, but I did actually super enjoy it when we played through it. I didn't have I think a lot of the community just looked at it like it's not the narrative experience that they expected, so they just
skipped it. Yeah, for sure. And then I think the reality is that certain genres, and I think maybe looter shooters are one of them, is pretty good isn't good enough. You can put out a pretty good game, and that's essentially a terrible game. Whereas RPGs aren't really like that. A pretty good RPG, it's like a cake. That's like it's still a cake, it's still delicious cake. Whereas I think with looter shooters, it's got to be great, or you might as well not try.
I totally agree. In fact, I just played an RPG that did not get great reviews, but it's still, like you said, it was a cake, and I could sink my teeth into it. It was Elix 2.
Right.
It was interesting. That's what I'll say. I guess I'm gonna go ahead and jump into the questions. I don't know where to start. Let's start with, we'll start with okay, so this one's from we have one of our moderators, Whiskey Sparks. First question that he came up with was it always planned to have Varric to be an unreliable narrator in terms of having room to change the narrative in the future?
Dragon Age has always been driven by unreliable narrators. Brother Genitivi sets up a lot of the lore and origins. You have to remember that Dragon Age 2 originally was going to be something that looked a lot more like Inquisition. And then we kind of had to jam something in there because Star Wars: The Old Republic slipped. So as soon as that happened, I'm pretty sure that the intention was always to do a frame narrative. And as soon as you were going to do a frame with a narrator, that narrator was going to be unreliable, for sure. Yeah.
Interesting.
There's no objective truth in Dragon Age, basically.
I'm sure that they'll love that idea. Though that it kind of works a little bit better, because if you've ever spent any time in a lot of these communities, the argue about canon is
yeah. I mean, I guess there is a reality in terms of physics and stuff like that, but anything presented from a perspective of history is always presented through a third party of some sort. So it's always up to for modification or what have you.
Okay, so let's see. Let's skip down to, we had one from, I'm going to paraphrase this one. It's from Mackenzie Jacobson. So this is actually one that I might ask this in two different versions. They both got a ton of votes. So we're going to start with the just general remake version. So if you had the opportunity to remake Dragon Age 2, what would have been some of the things that you would have done, that you would redo from the first time that you had done?
Yeah, I think my answer to that really depends on how deep we're going. But if I had a little bit of time, the first thing I would do is make it so that you always fought Meredith, but didn't always fight Orsino, so there was a bit more to that choice there, and the mages didn't. I feel that the fact that basically all of the mages in Kirkwall instantly turn into abominations after the rite of annulment is triggered kind of just makes Meredith right. I know everyone doesn't agree with me on that statement, but I feel it undercuts the dichotomy too much. So if I feel like there was an opportunity to let that be different and just let there be less content in the one branch. So we did it because things were really squished, and we just wanted to make sure everyone consumed as much of the content as we possibly could. The other thing is that So Act 2, when you're gathering resources to go into the deep roads, there's too much crit path there. So the actual purpose of that was supposed to be to give that space, that part of the game, a little bit of not open worldness, but freedom. But because there's so much crit path, just doing the amount of crit path basically gets you there. So either increasing the requirements of what you needed to give that a little bit more space, or squeezing down the crit path a little bit, just to pace that a little bit better, would be another thing.
Real quick, for everybody that's actually watching, define crit path for us.
Critical path is the part of the story that you have to consume. So for Dragon Age 2, it's basically you run away, you go into the deep roads, the Qunari show up, and then the Meredith goes crazy. The end. That's basically the crit path, is like those 4 big beats.
The main big story beats.
The main big story. But then what happens is in Act 2, which is the go into the deep roads part, that's also where all the characters are introduced, and so all those character introductions are mandatory. So you have to do them, except a couple can be pushed after the deep roads, and so that kind of unravels the pacing of that part of the game a little bit. I mean, it's okay, but the reality is that Dragon Age 2 is what it is because of the circumstances under which it was made. And there are bad things about that, but there are good things as well. And I worry that if you start trying to fix the bad things too much, that you actually will lose some of the good things as well. I mean, if you're doing a remake, make a couple more caves at least. Or at least make one more cave that doesn't have that like light beam picnic area bit in it. So you could use that cave 96 times instead of the one that is super identifiable. Maybe take that Varric banter from the I think it's from the Talus DLC, where he basically says that all caves look the same to him. Throw it up earlier in the Cassandra stuff, so you basically hang a lampshade on it in the actual game. But yeah, make one more cave at least, make one more warehouse at least. Though honestly, I don't think the warehouses are a big problem. It's really just that cave that's the big problem.
Interesting. Actually, there's a follow-up question. You kind of described what happened at the end of Act 3. When you're doing a game, narrative-wise, are the bits and the pieces worked out as you're sort of, is there some element of work on it as you go, or is a lot of it planned out? And then because it sounded like you're sort of saying that at the end of when you're working on Act 3, you kind of just had to push it through and be done and push product
So what
out.
usually happens, and this happened on Dragon Age 2 and Inquisition as well, is where you want to finish. Like that like someone had written down something to the effect of the Templars go crazy, the mages go crazy. I mean, the specifics of that may not have been known. I don't remember, and certainly we didn't know about the big giant like lyrium robots. That was a later addition as the art came online. But you usually know what the ending is. What often ends up happening as you develop is you realize that the pieces that in a novel would just be, and then they got on a ship and sailed to France. Next chapter, they're in France. You can't do that in some cases. They don't touch, and you end up having this missing interstitial stuff. And then that ends up being where a lot of pivots happen. Or the other thing that can happen is the writer might write two things that are written like they're touching, but the reality is there's 4 hours of gameplay there in between those two things. And when you actually when they're no longer touching, it doesn't make any sense. This is left dangling for too long. By the time you pick it up again, you don't remember what the heck is going on. And so then you end up having to put something in the middle to provide a stepping stone in between it, or provide some sort of stronger hook. So usually when the story is mutating, it's because things aren't meshing, they're not touching properly. Inquisition, very late in the day, we had to try to make sense of Corypheus's plan, which still doesn't make any sense, but because it didn't, you're just like, why is all this happening? What's he doing? And it's because it's ultimately, it's too complicated on the page. It's like on the page, it's fine, but for the player, you're like, so if your plan involves become a god as an intermediary step, that's probably your plan is too complicated. And that's Corypheus's plan is, I'm going to make Tevinter awesome again. And step 2 of that is become a god. And then there are more steps after. And it's like, but like become a god was like, isn't that the plan? Isn't that the goal? Not an intermediary step, but then he's like destabilizing Orlais, and he's getting the Grey Wardens off the field, and it's just a lot. So there was a lot done really late in the day to try to just make that aim to something that you could see, because you're further away. You're further away from the crit path, from the story, than you are in a novel, which is why the characters have to carry it so much more, because you're close to them. You understand that relationship. But when things are happening to factions as opposed to humans, it's a lot harder to understand what this has to do with anything.
Interesting. All right, thanks. Okay, so let's see. Let's go to, we have one from Rhapsody Shepherd. This is another moderator or admin in the group. Let's see. So she asked, how do fan expectations impact the development process, or if they do?
Okay. They definitely can. So there is a lot of people on the team are very active in social media, used to be active on the BioWare forums, but slowly burned out on that. So there is a lot of attention paid. I think in the current world of social media, the channels are can get a little echo chambery. So if you're someone on Twitter who's a BioWare dev, the people who follow you for a specific reason. So the things that they tweet at you get a lot of attention from that person that may not be very representative of the actual player expectations. And indeed, anyone who is spending time interacting on forums for anything, it has self-selected to be in the higher echelons of engagement in that property. So it's definitely worth listening to those people, but you always have to be aware that there might be 10 times, 100 times as many people who have no idea who Malvernus is. And so over-referencing that person is going to be super confusing. And so you have to listen, but evaluate as well. So yeah, it definitely happens.
Okay. Excuse me. Let's see. All right, I'm gonna ask one of my own questions, because this one actually comes up a ton, constantly brought up at the group. It's something that everybody wants to know about, I think. So it'd be great to actually just I may pick your brain a bit about it. Okay, so how difficult would it actually be to remaster Dragon Age Origins from a technical perspective? And then sort of as a follow-on, does it make sense from your perspective financially to do that, or is it just better to go ahead and remake the whole thing?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So my plan originally, in early Joplin days, before it became clear that EA at the time had no interest in making Frostbite be something that users could interact with directly, was to have Joplin have a tool set like Dragon Age Origins, then have it out in the wild, then find a group that was talented and essentially uplift them into a studio and have them remake Dragon Age Origins. A remaster is, it depends on how far you want to go. So Mass Effect Ultimate, what the heck is it called? Whatever the Mass Effect new Enhanced Edition, whatever the
Legendary
remaster.
Edition.
Legendary Edition, that's what it's called. The Mass Effect Legendary Edition, they was mostly done externally. And they could do that because it's in Unreal. As a result, there are lots of studios that can, even with the old decrepit version of Unreal that is Mass Effect 1, could go in and they could do that. Dragon Age Origins and Dragon Age 2 are definitely not that. Now, Dragon Age Origins Eclipse is a pretty simple engine compared to Unreal. So there are studios that are capable of doing it, and there are studios like the studio that actually helped port Dragon Age Origins to the consoles is still around, I think. And so they potentially would be a possibility to do a remaster.
But it's not impossible.
It's not impossible. So we did some math, might be too generous a term. Sure. Some guesses. It would be more expensive than doing Legendary Edition, just by the nature of the beast. So if you do Origins, you almost get Dragon Age 2 for free.
Interesting.
But and you might be able to get away with, if you were going to do a remaster, I would be tempted with Inquisition to go in, have someone just touch up all the textures. I mean, there's some things that I might rebalance in terms of the power requirements for certain missions, but whatever. You could just probably get away with just cranking everything up to 10 and calling it a day. Origins is the big one because it's pretty, I mean, I'm streaming it right now, but it's pretty ugly. So it could be done. And the reason, so my original thinking was do a remaster. It's just too far gone.
You mean a remake?
But the reality is if you do a remaster, I think you have to, my original thinking was do a remake, it's too far gone. But my thinking now is if you do a remake, it necessitates kind of taking a look at everything. And there's stuff in Dragon Age Origins that kind of wouldn't fly in a game that was shipping today. Gameplay, but also themes and other things. So as a remaster, I think you just ignore that. I mean, I know that Legendary Edition, they did reshoot some of the more ridiculous camera shots from some of the Liara stuff, but
Miranda, her butt.
Miranda stuff, yeah, the Miranda butts stuff. But for the most part, they just ignored it. I think with a remaster of Dragon Age Origins, you don't worry about all of that. Maybe you do something with in the Pearl, but otherwise you just ignore it. With a remake, I think you have to examine all of that. So I think, so if you asked me in 2020, I would have said they're never going to do it because Mass Effect have been trying to do a remaster since 2014, probably. Really? Like forever. And really, honestly, the time to do it was probably in 2014, 2015, because it would have been a lot easier to do it then because you wouldn't have had to move it so far. But it did really well. So they did it. Finally, they got permission to do it. They got the budget and it did really well. So today, I would have said there's like 0% chance if you'd asked me in 2020. Now I think there is a chance. I don't know what I would put that number at, but there is a chance that EA will decide that this could be done. This would make money, which it would. And now the reality is EA hates spending money. So they would have to decide for some reason to spend that money. One of the problems that Dragon Age would have is that BioWare doesn't have a lot of the people, like the technical people that were there for Origins. So it would be someone going into someone else's code to a large degree, but it's a relatively simple code base. So get it running on new hardware, update the DirectX version to DirectX 12. I think it's like DirectX 9. And, see if you can program procedurally up-res some of the texture. I think you could do it. You could definitely do it. I just don't know what it costs to get it to be worth doing, to make it good.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Okay, cool. That actually answers a lot of questions. A lot of debate in the group about whether or not it's even possible to do. Try to tell people, oh, it's possible.
It's possible.
May not be worth it, but it's possible.
I think it would be worth it, but EA hates spending money.
Judging from the group's perception, I'm pretty sure it would be worth it to them. Though they may still, the difference between whether or not the cost between remastering and just making a new game.
It's probably, I guess, again, guessing. I think to do the trilogy, you're talking
about the whole trilogy.
The whole trilogy. To do all three of them and to retroactively, because we talked about this, and you would retroactively brand it as a trilogy and call it the Champions trilogy or something. Like you would retcon it into being it was always intended to be a trilogy that stood on its own and apart. To do all that would be you can do it for under $20 million, I think, which is a lot, but a lot less than a new Dragon Age.
I was gonna say it's probably a lot less than whatever they've spent at this point.
They've spent more than $20 million on Dragon Age at this point already. So
okay, cool. All right, so let's get down to okay. And I'm gonna probably mangle this. Leanne Varga, I can't tell quite. She wanted to know what's the most challenging or funniest issue you had during the production of the Dragon Age games, and then how did you solve it?
So it's funny, and I know that QA always thinks that bugs are hilarious, and there are some that are funny in the moment, but usually there isn't a lot of amusing bugs that I remember. Either they get blocked out just by the stress of shipping, or in retrospect they weren't that funny. Like a couple of times we tried to put together sort of blooper reels for Dragon Age games, and what you end up with is it's just awful, to be frank. Is you get like one or two things that are super hilarious, like the horses riding the person or something, but then you get just 10 minutes of textures or of meshes stretching to infinity and people falling through the ground, and it's so funniest is usually, I can't think of anything. I'm sure other people have better answers to that question. I do remember when we were doing Inquisition, actually figuring out how in the world to pace open world was really challenging. This was coming off of Skyrim, and we started before Skyrim had shipped, but Skyrim was a real touchstone, and really not having any understanding of what open world meant, or having to build like an entire vocabulary around designer hugs and density of content and how to review them, because you can review a story by you just sit down and you play through the story, and then you talk about like, oh, here's the branch, and this is what the branch would have been like, and you can kind of talk through it and just you can go through a plot in however long it takes you to play through it, basically, and put on magical kill swords, and the combats are instant, and you can play through most plots in an hour. You can't play through an open world area, even the multi-regional open world areas of Inquisition, in an hour. There's no way to really evaluate them in that way. You have to evaluate them in a different way. So that's probably the biggest challenge the franchise has had, is figuring out how to even have a conversation about open worlds.
Was that the right decision, in your opinion, to move to an open world format?
It was because of the reality of the marketplace at the
Market.
time. So yeah, so if you look at the games in isolation, I would say I still might say yes, only because the games had been probably, if we kept going the way we'd been going, they were kind of tightening down more and more. It needed something to kind of break open the boundaries. But if you look at the games without any thinking about anything else that was going on in the marketplace, or even just what the franchise was doing, probably not. What you wanted was something bigger than DA2 for sure. And I think with a bit more exploration than was in Origins. So more like what you see in what's called wide linear now, which so things like God of War and that, where there's room to move around in the spaces, but there's much more purpose. Something like the bog in or the Storm Coast in Dragon Age Inquisition is probably what the game should have been more like. More regions like that. So narrower, more purpose, more aiming you to a goal with more room to move around as you're going there, as opposed to something like, well, I won't even talk about the history, but something like the Hinterlands, or Hinterlands is a special case. So even something like Adamant Fortress or that, though they're too directionless and too open to really provide purpose.
Interesting. Okay. Let's see. Okay, here's one from Julia Bop. Did the team experience pushback for trying to include LGBTQ relationships and representation through the series?
I don't think so. So Jade Empire had, I think, the first gay romance in video gaming. I could be wrong, but it was certainly early. And there was a lot of pearl clutching at that time. There was, after Mass 1 came out, there was a group within BioWare that really worried about that whole Fox News thing. And so that became a thing. But honestly, I think that the Dragon Age team, as opposed to other parts of BioWare, has always been much more focused on these issues. So if anything, with Mass Effect, I feel like the Fox News stuff kind of made them kind of like get on their guard. With Dragon Age, I kind of felt like the opposite. It was like, oh great, now we can get on Fox News too. Let's just go all in. But I mean, there's some stuff in Origins that is played for a laugh that I wonder if it wasn't. It's hard to know what's going on in a writer's head, but I wonder if it wasn't done just to maybe be a little softer. But I don't remember any pushback from. I remember more pushback on using the word "fuck" in
naughty.
Dragon Age 2, I think it was, from within the team. From
by Dragon Age 2.
Yeah. I just think because we hadn't really used it. We didn't use it before that in the series. It was just, I think, for whatever reason, it was just first for someone within the studio leadership. That was the line for whatever reason.
Interesting. You'd almost think that, with the amount of just gore and violence that shows up, that just a 4-letter word wouldn't be that bad.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people in North America have a bizarrely disconnected relationship between violence, sex, and profanity, and have their bars are not where you would imagine they would be if you just kind of lined them up. Like of those three things, you would think the violence would be the worst one, but often it's the least, on some people's list, it's often the least cared
Right.
about.
Yeah, the most acceptable somehow
Yeah.
socially. Okay, so Bella, this is from Bella Nix. I'm gonna start. Her first one was okay. So what do you think of some of the more popular fan theories that have sprouted up over the years? And do you have a favorite?
So I will say that for Mass Effect, I really I can't even remember what it's called.
Indoctrination theory.
I love that. I love that theory.
No!
That's my. I love it. I think it's hilarious.
No!
Um,
That is endless debate in the group. There is completely endless debate about
it's not gonna be. Well, I don't know. I mean, they have to. I assume so. So for Mass 5, they gotta take up the pieces somehow. So maybe it's a convenient out if they need one. But I don't think it was never intended to be the reality. I don't want to comment too much on Dragon Age fan theories. They're too often right. So I don't want to get BioWare mad at me.
Fair enough. All right, so let's see. Let's try this one. So this is probably one that was several people that had asked. Out of all which was your favorite game out of all 3 games that you worked on?
So the game that is closest to what we were trying to do is Inquisition. The one that I'm sort of most proud of what was accomplished is Dragon Age 2. It short, tight. The team started at a sprint and got faster from there. I think Dragon Age, if I'm going to sit down and play one, I think, though I haven't played, so I'm playing Origins right now. I haven't played Dragon Age 2 or Inquisition in a long time. I think Inquisition is going to be the one that I will enjoy the most. But in terms of, we were setting out to make a thing, and it was the closest to what we were trying to make. Inquisition's the closest.
Okay, interesting. You don't know, you might like Dragon Age 2. I've personally played it like 7 times, I think, and I have not played either of the others that many times, just because it kind of, like you said, it's very tight. It just goes
it's hyper focused on the characters. Yeah. I did play a little bit of it just to get some gameplay capture of it, and it is, yeah, like it's very it feels like I'm moving through it very quickly, whereas Origins, it took me, it's got to be like 8 hours to do the Arl Eamon plot line. And it's like, that's a lot. I kind of forget why it's like, once you're inception down of, I need to get some people to go fight the Archdemon. Okay, got it. I need to wait, there's a kid here. Oh, I'm going to go to the Mage Tower to save him. Okay, and then it's like, oh, but now I need to go into the Urn of Sacred Ashes to get the ashes, to save the guy, to give me the troops. It's like, I don't know. I've sort of lost the plot a little bit here. So I do think that it'll be interesting when I get to actually sit down and play Dragon Age 2 through, because you're right. It's super focused. It definitely has characters right up front, which Inquisition doesn't as much, and Origins doesn't as much, because it just has way more everything else. Dragon Age 2 cuts everything else. All that's left is the characters.
Yeah. Speaking of that, question that came up for GA2 was, what companion was your favorite? Which of the
Dragon Age 2?
Yeah.
I think Varric, just because, he's written to always got your back. He's just always there for you. I do like Meryl's kind of like Blood Mage next door kind of character as well. But I think Varric, honestly, for Dragon Age 2, just because, he's your pal, and no matter what you do, you're never having a problem with Varric.
I got to give you a hard time for taking Blood Mages out of Inquisition, because, man, I love playing Blood Mages in the first 2. And when they didn't, I mean, I get story-wise why it's right. Like, wait, what's a Blood Mage doing here? Because there's parts in Dragon Age 2 where you're like, how is this even possible? You just You're having people go kill every blood mage, and yet you're a blood mage.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of dialogue in Dragon Age 2 to try to put a lampshade on that. Like, you're a better kind of blood mage, aren't you? Isn't there someone that's like, yeah, all these people with the slitting and the blood everywhere, that's just lame blood magic. You're much better at it, or something. It's some sort of one. You're a good one. You know what you're doing. Yeah, it's I'm not saying that it's definitely putting a lampshade on it. It's not actually making it make sense.
They were fun gameplay mechanics, though, actually.
Yeah.
Like, aside from the idea that they were just the terriblest things in the world in the lore, but it's actually fun gameplay mechanics.
It is something that I actually think that Dragon Age sets up a lot of really interesting lore consequences to a lot of things, like being a Templar, or being a blood mage, or being a warden, and then never really pays them off in gameplay as having consequences to the person who has it. So you're a blood mage, you've got a demon in your, like, if you're a mage, there's like a demon like hanging out just waiting all the time, right? That's the lore. But that has never come up except for the beginning of Origins, where you do the whatever it's called. I can't remember what it's called. Not the joining, the mage thing.
Yeah.
The magey thing that you do. That's it. It never comes up again. So I do actually feel like Origins has great lore consequences for everything. You need wardens, because if you get darkspawn blood on you too much, you turn into a ghoul. And then you literally wade through 1,000 darkspawns with 3 people with you that are not wardens, and they're fine. And a dog. All
right, so let's see. I'll ask. This one comes from one of our admins again. What's the largest design hurdle between DAO or Dragon Age Origins and Dragon Age 2?
So design hurdle. So Dragon Age has always been. EA's never really got it. There's always been this sort of push to be wider, be wider. So the combat in Dragon Age 2, like the mechanics of it are actually almost identical to the combat in Dragon Age Origins. Just the knobs are in literally completely different places.
Really?
Yeah, it's basically the same system. It's got the pause and play stuff. It's got the abilities. It's basically almost all the same stuff. It's just that what Origins is it's 100% symmetrical, which is a problem. Dragon Age 2 is like, symmetry is for losers. We're going to make the most asymmetrical thing that's ever been created, which is also a problem. So that's, I think, probably the biggest design hurdle, and I don't actually think it was exactly successful. Super perfectly symmetrical systems are almost impossible to balance, and Dragon Age Origins is certainly unbalanced in places.
So that's interesting from a user perspective. From our player perspective, you think that Dragon Age 2 is much closer to Dragon Age Inquisition because of Dragon Age Origin has that weird sort of real-time turn-based. I don't even know what to describe that. It's like that was a unique BioWare thing. I don't know if any other game really had that.
Yeah, it's got the pause and play thing. Dragon Age 2 actually has it there too. There's just literally it's been tuned so that you don't really need to use it. You can pause and switch, and it's just that you don't have TACCAM. So if you play Origins on the consoles, which it doesn't have TACCAM, and then play Dragon Age 2, you can sort of see the DNA is more obvious because you don't have the sort of Neverwinter, the echo of Neverwinter coming through as much. So yeah, it's so thematically or emotionally or spiritually, Dragon Age 2 and Dragon Age Inquisition are closer together. Mechanically, Dragon Age Origins and Dragon Age 2 are closer together. So Dragon Age 2 is, maybe this is one way to think of it, is Dragon Age 2 is Dragon Age Origins trying to be Dragon Age Inquisition in a way, in a weird way.
Yeah, that's interesting because Dragon Age 2 the player feels responsive. When you hit A
Yeah.
to go to attack, you actually attack. And in Origins, you hit A and then you sort of stand there and you like run over and then just start attacking as a command that just repeats.
Yeah, so that's right. I mean, Dragon Age Origins is definitely, it's like Baldur's Gate.
Right.
It's you issue a command and then the command includes the movement, but Dragon Age 2 kind of gets around that by baking a lot of movement into the moves. So you get there as part of the move, as opposed to having to awkwardly walk over and then the guy has died and then you stop moving and like there's just a lot of things where Dragon Age Origins feels like a game. The combat feels a lot like a game from more like the early 2000s.
Well, it does. It actually felt almost identical to KOTOR.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because it's Jade Empire, like that is like a complete detour from that feeling. So was Jade Empire the same engine as I don't know this.
Jade Empire is made using the Neverwinter engine, so that's Aurora.
Really?
So KOTOR and Neverwinter and Jade Empire are all Aurora. And then Dragon Age Origins and Dragon Age 2 are Eclipse, which is this bastardized love child of Eclipse and this other engine that was being built by a technology group within BioWare that kind of got smushed together into what became the Dragon Age engine, the Eclipse engine. Unless I've got Eclipse and Aurora backwards, which I sometimes do.
I don't remember off the top of my head either, but somebody can Google it if they're really interested. Let's see. Well, here's a good one. You got 58 votes for Enchantment. Okay, we'll just call that a yes. All right, so from Rhapsody, did Anthem's live service approach impact BioWare's plans for DA4?
Yes. So I will go into this. So if you subscribe to the YouTube channel, I will eventually talk about Anthem in probably exhausting detail. But what I'll say is, so I was leading Dragon Age at the time when Casey came back and Anthem was having trouble. So they moved me on to Anthem. Part of that, there was a request for Dragon Age to be a live service at that time. So honestly, I think that was a justification being used to explain why they were stripping the team down. But that was the reason given at the time. And then, I mean, I was on for almost 2 years on Anthem. In that time, Dragon Age started to develop that live service. And when I came back, that was the game that was being made. That's no longer the game that's being made.
Right.
But that was the game that was being made. And so, yeah, it absolutely did. So Anthem's live service design absolutely impacted development on the games that were in development, which was basically just Dragon Age at the same time. And then Anthem flying into the side of a mountain also impacted the view towards BioWare making live services. So it did both. It made a huge change and then also provided the evidence to unmake that change.
Interesting. Okay, so this one, second one from Bella Nix, someone who became interested. She's saying she became interested in game development because of Dragon Age and Mass Effect. She is asking what the world building process is like for you.
So I like a system, I like world building. So I guess I almost answered a question and then I realized it was different than what she was asking, maybe. if you are talking world building as in the world of Thetis or the universe of Mass Effect, for me, I think you want enough so that everything basically makes sense at any point in time along the way. But you don't want to have if you have a giant 600-page Bible of everything, like this is what this people tap this tree to get a sticky liquid to put on their pancakes, and it's called this, you've gone too far, because that thing, someone's got to maintain that, and it's basically handcuffs that's going to prevent you from doing what you might need to do. So an example from Dragon Age is an early restriction was no teleporting. And the reason for no teleporting is basically teleporting breaks everything, because if I could just teleport into the throne room and stab the king in the back of the head, why doesn't everyone just do that? But what's happened over time is Dragon Age has basically become some teleporting, but you got to explain why, basically almost every time. Or in Dragon Age 2, it's not teleporting, it's just you're moving really fast, and you're not really teleporting. So you want to have some rules like that, but you want just enough. That's one of the reasons why Dragon Age loves the unreliable narrator. We can say basically whatever we want from the perspective of history and lore, and turns out that guy was wrong, or that guy was lying, or that guy had a political motivation for saying what he said because he wanted people to join his religion, which is a common one in Dragon Age. So that's why it loves that. If that's what she means by world building, she means, I think so. I think that's what she means. Yeah. So I think just enough. And
don't back yourself into a corner, right?
You're going to paint yourself into some corners, but don't paint yourself in. Don't build a room of infinite corners with just paint everywhere. That's a problem. It's going to be a big problem.
All right, let's see. Okay, so this one from another moderator, Whiskey Sparks. Here you go. This is a good one. Is there any point in time during DA2's development that you sat back and just thought, this is masterpiece material, despite all the constraints that you had?
Anytime you're reviewing a plot when it's really hitting, you get that feeling, like especially the stuff at the end. I do feel like the very end kind of stumbles, but I think the stuff with Anders, I really love that. I think it's like, it hits really hard, and I think it's really good. And then maybe the consequences of that are like undercut a little bit. But up until that moment when suddenly all the mages decide, oh yeah, becoming an abomination sounds swell, I think that part's awesome.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask one of my own questions. Was there a person or team specifically responsible for taking the Dragon Age series from a darker, grittier fantasy setting to the higher sort of fantasy setting that it's moving towards, or is that more of a market-driven decision?
It's not it's not really been a market-driven decision. Though that being said, with Dragon Age 4, there was some conversation about, Witcher kind of sits pretty strongly on dark fantasy, but before that, I don't feel like we ever really looked at it from a market perspective. The reality is grimdark gets psychologically exhausting. I think there's probably, if you're doing that for too long, I think it starts to just wear you down. So I was pulling it away from it. The art director was pulling it away from it. Mike Laidlaw, when he was creative director, was pulling it away from it. So
a lot of people during the process just felt like, this is where the series should go. That's right. And it's the reality is that, like Dragon Age 2 is still pretty dark, and Origin and Inquisition is
with
Hawk's mom.
Yeah, exactly. The thing that's
I
feel like the part that really has been, it's we'll see with Dragon Age 4. I feel like it might move more thematically away from some of the dark fantasy stuff, but even in Inquisition, I feel like the dark fantasy themes are still there. It's the sort of the dark fantasy art direction and like blood and just sort of over sexualization. That's the stuff that's been really being pushed away more than the themes. The themes I think are still there to a large degree. Maybe not, maybe less in Inquisition, but
okay. Let's see. How much time do we have? We have a few minutes. Well, tell me how you are in time.
we can go a little bit over this. Fine.
Okay. Let's see. So, are you considering starting your own dev studio?
So I'm not really looking to like make a big giant team right now, but part of my channel is I'm well, when I actually do it.
I see you're wearing the
I'm wearing my
high
high T and the high C shirt.
Yeah.
So I am making a game, High T and the High C's, as an example game to use for the channel. We'll try to ship it, but right now we're not like, I don't count me as a studio. Will that turn into something? Maybe. I would certainly not close the door, but unlike Casey, I'm not looking for investors and hiring 35 people, at least not yet.
Gotcha. Okay. Everybody go sub so you can check out High T's and the High C's. Let's see. I think we're getting through most of them. Okay, personal preference question. Both development and as a player, it's kind of two-parter there. Voiced character or voiced player character or non-voiced player character?
So I think I prefer a voiced player character for myself as a player. I think it also makes the storytelling, the presentation you can do with a voice character from a storytelling perspective is much more. You can see it in Origins all the time. It's like you've got some shot of the player character just standing there like a dope because they can't say anything. So there's just more opportunities. I understand the people who prefer the voiceless protagonist because it just is much more tabula rasa. You can put yourself into the role a lot more. I think we've probably, that ship has probably sailed, and the expectation from the mainstream marketplace now is that the protagonist be voiced. I'm trying to think of a
Starfield, for the most part, but Bethesda just said Starfield's going to be a non-voice protagonist, which I think
so
a lot of people were like, "What?"
So because I was thinking because Skyrim is non-voice protagonist,
yeah,
right?
But Fallout 4 they voiced.
Right.
They actually got a lot of pushback for that, even though it's okay. There's not, I mean, there's nothing, I wouldn't say there's nothing wrong with it, but they just got a lot of pushback from at least that. And there is kind of a different player. I mean, a lot of people, it's a lot of overlap, right? Kind of a weird Venn diagram between all the different communities.
The other thing that's interesting with the Bethesda games is I play Bethesda games third person, which I'm in the minority. But if you play it in the first person, I think first person voiced is a little bit weirder as well, because it's not as, with third person, it's like, oh, it's this person is talking, even though I'm kind of that person, there's a little bit of distance. First person, it's like, I'm talking, that's not my voice. So it's a little bit weirder. The reality, though, is from a development perspective, voice protagonist is a pain in the butt because you, first of all, you need to record at least 2 entire voices, at least 2. These days, you probably want at least 3, but you probably want 4 or 5.
You have 4 for Inquisition, right?
Inquisition is 4. You think you can get away with maybe 2 with a tones, like a tonal slider. Maybe you could do that, but you need at least 2 because you need at least a masculine sounding one and a feminine sounding one. And that's like that character is so many more words than any other character in the entire game by like orders of like probably 50 times as many lines as any other character in the entire game. And with a silent protagonist, you can actually, as it turns out, you can kind of fix a lot. You can pour writing on a lot more problems. You can fix a lot more sins by having the player say something or change what the player says, and then kind of splice around that. Like they can just say, "Oh, it turns out no, I slipped on a banana peel," and it's like you can fix a lot more problems if the player is voiced. You basically they're the thing you can't change, because to change them, you got to re-record 4 people as opposed to just re-recording one.
Did you have to do that? Did you have to?
It happens, yeah.
Really?
It happens because you just realize that this plot doesn't make any sense. We need a new player line, but you try desperately to make it work by changing a non-player line if you can, because it's so much more expensive.
So do the actual voice actors like sit under contract where once you bring them in, like if there's something happens that you can
they do they do, and usually the players are done very late for that reason as well, but sometimes you're still doing it even later.
Interesting. And is there situations where you might not be able to bring them back? Like how would that? Do they have? I would assume
it
that
can
actors
happen.
They have
So,
scheduling problems, or you couldn't bring them back in.
Yeah, so normally with the player characters, that's part of the deal. Is like you gotta basically be available. But for the other character, like if you've got Kate Mulgrew and like, oh, turns out Kate Mulgrew's filming Orange is the New Black, so tough luck, she's not available. And with the smaller parts, that does happen, and then you end up having to either, which has happened, recast the entire character, which has happened for smaller minor things. You just recast the entire character and re-record it all because you needed more pickup and you couldn't get the original actor, or you introduce another character, or you write something different, or you cut the line and eat it.
Interesting. Couple more. Let's see. What games are you playing now?
So I've got a big list of things I mean to be playing,
yes.
including Riven. Hilariously, I decided a couple days ago that I should see if I can find a copy of Riven and give it a play. The sequel to Myst, for people who are not ancient.
I was gonna say that's old. Riven
is super old. It's gotta be. It's gotta be.
You sure you want to play that? That's
but Elden Ring's on my immediate to do.
Play Elden Ring. It's good.
It's the thing I was solely working my way through was actually was Guardians of the Galaxy, which I actually really liked. I know that some people kind of got annoyed by it, but
I wasn't a big fan of it. I tried personally, but Elden Ring I could definitely vouch for. It's a very, very engaging game. You can play with friends too. So if you find that it's really, if you get your ass whooped, you can call in your homies that have beat Millennia like 40 times. Okay, let's see. Are you aware of, this comes from Garen Dane Bell, are you aware of any plans, or maybe you can't speak too much, but at some point were there plans for anything to happen, novels, games, comics, anything in different ages other than Dragon Age?
As far as I know, no. I think that, Dragon Age is the name that happened to the game as opposed to was planned for. So my feeling on new IP, so Dragon Age in Dragon Age Origins timeline was new IP, is you got to kind of plant the seed and not be like digging around it too much. So that was always my push, was always like let's just stay around this to make sure that this is set really well, and then at a later date, if you want to come in and do something set like in a previous age or a future age, you can. But as far as I know, that there's been no intention yet to do that. I would think that in a post Dragon Age 4 world would be the first time you would want to be having that conversation.
Okay. This one, personal, this is actually my question. So this is your own perspective on it. And obviously you actually made a comment earlier about how EA basically sort of decided that it wasn't going to put into player interaction with Frostbite. But at the time that you guys decided to move to Frostbite and do everything. Was that the correct decision?
It was the only possible decision.
No,
So the options were basically, we could have probably argued to keep working on Eclipse, but that engine was already long in the tooth.
Couldn't have gone to Unreal and the same as the Mass Effect.
It's not politically
Okay.
no. So if like all the politics aside, yeah, you could have. I mean, Unreal in the Mass 1 timeline, which I guess we weren't in the Mass 1 timeline. We were really more in the Mass 3 timeline. Unreal was in pretty good shape by then. Yeah. Wasn't really set up to do really open world, but then again, it was Frostbite. So you know, you could have done the same thing, multi-region open world. Maybe there would have been tighter constraints on the spaces. Not anymore, and now Unreal can do basically any sizes of area. So yeah, so the funny thing about that question is that question, it's same as the question, like any of those sorts of questions of was it the right decision. It was, because that was the political situation we were in. But if you throw the politics out, no, the probably the right decision would have been to go into Unreal. I think it would have set the studio up in a better place. A lot of the missteps that I feel happened on Andromeda and on Anthem came from, I think, just resistance from both of those teams to really embrace Frostbite and you know, get on board. I'm not sure it would have been any better with Unreal, but at least there was a lot more people out in the world that are capable of helping you on an Unreal game than on a Frostbite game.
Yeah, definitely something to worry about, huh? All right, so I actually have a question about difficulty. So, and just personally as playing, I play on, I just one of those people that likes to punish myself. I play it on as hard as most games on as hard as they possibly can be, just because I don't know, I'm a glutton for it. So Dragon Age in particular, all 3 games and Awakening had considerable spikes in difficulty on Nightmare mode that were just like, you would play through and you might be able to get through. I mean, it's hard, you know, you can fight enemies and they don't take much damage, but you kind of get used to that. But then there would be moments where it would really spike, like whatever the thing was you fought in the Deep Roads at Dragon Age 2, that still sticks out in my head as being, you could just plow through the game and then get to this spot and it would be almost impossible to beat. And especially was the Aeroshock fight. Oh man, that is literally like an hour of running in circles and sicking the dog on him. Is that not as much attention gets sent to the higher difficulties, or how to improve the AI versus just jacking up the health?
No, so definitely they are. So Nightmare it's not just cranking up the number of hit points, the amount of damage they do, but like there usually is some AI work done,
some aggressiveness,
there's some aggressiveness and power usage. And I think Dragon Age has gotten better at that as time has gone on. But the reality is yeah, no, Nightmare does not get as much attention as Normal does by any stretch of the imagination. Okay. Like Normal gets the most attention.
Sure.
Easy and hard get about the same amount of attention as each other. Nightmare gets like one slightly sadistic combat designer and QA person who's been playing combat too long to make sure it's possible, and that's basically what it gets. Like it's possible. It's possible. That's about all I can guarantee about Nightmare.
So that's interesting. So that's kind of something I wondered, like, sometimes do the QA people just get too used to playing the game and they sort of lose track of where their bias sits?
Yeah, that's actually, I think, one of the reasons why Origins is balanced so hard is the combat was existed for a long time. QA gets used to it and they get too good at it, and then it gets turned up to balance to them, and then they get used to that and it gets turned up again. So absolutely, they get way too good at it. The other thing that happens a lot, and this is much more prevalent in actually both DA2 and Inquisition, I think, have this worse than Origins, is they figure out the build that is totally broken, and then they just play with that build, and it turns out, well, that build can get through anything easily. If you don't have that build, good luck to you.
But they get to make that. They get to choose that. Like I can okay, well,
For,
if it's time to test it, I can just go build my own build. Like they don't
I
get
mean, it's
forced to
got
play with all the
they're
different
not no,
builds.
for normal. Yeah, for normal they got to play
Okay.
everything. But with Nightmare, you're just basically getting coverage. So all you're really making
Hmm.
sure is that it's going to pass cert, and that just means that it's got to be possible.
Interesting. Okay.
So
Now I know
now
why I
is that true of
wanted to throw my
all games
controller.
outside of Bioware? I don't know. I mean, honestly, I think probably a lot of games that's how Nightmare is done.
I imagine the hardest difficulties like that with a lot of games, just
Yeah,
because they don't expect all the people to go play
no,
that.
absolutely. It's a very small minority of people.
Yeah, I'm one of those people, and I try to break everything. I'm the type of person that's like, yeah, I'm just gonna try. If the game told me to go do something, I go the other way.
Yeah, but I
Let's
mean,
go
like
see
you
what
can build,
happens.
like in Dragon Age 2, you can build two-handed fighters that can do hundreds of thousands of points of damage with a single hit. So
Yeah, except you got to keep your entire party away from them, or they'll
yeah,
murder everybody on Nightmare. I think we're at the end of our list. Let me just read one more look over and see if there's anything else. I am actually real quick. I'm just gonna pop over to the actual Facebook.
yeah, because I assume
They probably haven't. I have not looked at any of it, so I'm gonna see if anybody doop 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 doop. It actually won't load for me. Yeah, doesn't look like it looks like most people were just watching, not posting any new questions. So, okay, so I guess that's about it. I really appreciate you coming around to have a chat with us.
yeah, for sure.
Again, I know you're not on Facebook and using it. If you ever do decide to reactivate and hop into your Facebook account, come join the group. There is there's 30,000 people in there that love to just have a chit chat about whatever it is, Dragon Age. You probably just find it by searching for it. And in general, all you guys need to go and check out Mark's channel. Make sure you give him a sub and some likes on all those videos he's got. It's fantastic. And I don't know if anybody that's into software development, don't even have to be game development, because I work in software. I've been in software development for about 15 years in the business side of things. And your videos are absolutely fascinating. I mean, there's a lot of information in there that I just feel like I'm soaking up so much like experience and knowledge when I sit there and listen to it. It's actually super good. So I think everybody has a chance that wants to go and should check it out.
That's the goal. Yeah, for sure. I think there is useful stuff there. I mean, if you're not in game development, some of them are not going to be your cup of tea, but some of them are just interesting as well. So
yeah, no, it's super interesting. I really, really appreciate it. I hope everybody from the group will show up and give you some support. Maybe we can do it again sometime.
sure.
And otherwise, I thank you much. I don't know what else to say, but just thank you. So
Yeah, thank you. Thank you as well. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's good talk. I actually really enjoyed it. So everybody say thanks to Mark Darrah, and we will see you later.
Okay.
Thanks, man.
Bye.
Bye.